The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or beliefs of Marshall University, Marshall University Libraries, the Department of English, the College of Liberal Arts, Marshall University Film Studies, or HerdCon. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Giant Bombs, exploring cinema through famous film flops. As always, I am Cody Lumpkin, and with me as always, and with me, as always, is Professor Ian Nolte. And we have a special guest today in Shoshannah Diehl. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Shoshannah is a Marshall University alum and a current faculty member in the English department, so she is a colleague of ours. She teaches fantasy lit and textual analysis. Her scholarly interests lie in fantasy, popular culture, and anything related to girlhood. And I do believe you are not only a fan of Taylor Swift, but you are also a scholar of Taylor Swift.
Yes, that is true.
All right. So we won't be talking about the Eras Tour because that was quite a success financially. But we'll be talking about the 1996 film Matilda, which is an adaptation of Roald Dahl's novel of the same name that came out in 1988. Here's a little film summary from IMDb. A girl gifted with a keen intellect and psychic powers uses both to get even with her callous family and free her kindly school teacher from the tyrannical grip of a sadistic headmistress. This was a film that had a box office of $47 million, but it cost $36 million to make, so it didn't make a profit. It was considered a disappointment on its initial release. And in 1996, Matilda was the fourth highest grossing film of 1996. It was released on April 2nd. That was when the 1996 Olympics were happening in the simpler times of the 1990s in Atlanta, Georgia. Matilda is directed by the legend Danny DeVito and stars Danny DeVito, Rhea Perlman, Mara Wilson, Embeth Davidtz, and Pam Ferris. So kind of interested, Shoshannah, you would want to, I had not seen this film ever before, so thanks for suggesting this film. Was kind of your interest in the film, love of the film, the book, all that stuff.
Yeah, I did not know that about it coming out during 1996 Olympics. And I'm wondering if the reason I didn't see it in theaters was because I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was partaking in 1996 Olympics things as an audience member. So I did not know that it was a box office disappointment. I didn't know that it was a box office anything. I didn't know that it came to theaters because I was introduced to it, and a lot of people that are my age were introduced to it through home video. And so when I was looking into the different, what kind of made it a cult classic, a lot of people discovered it that way. So I was kind of interested in how it holds up on screen. And then I also Matilda is the first book that I really remember loving. It was like the book that made reading my personality. Like I was reading before that, but to see like the on-screen reading and stuff like that with the film, and then also with the book, I really enjoyed. And so I just really am a 90s kid who loves it and doesn't feel like it. I don't feel like it gets enough recognition.
I'm from the Atlanta, north of Atlanta. I grew up there, and I'd graduated and was going to college, so Matilda was not the audience for me at that point. And I remember seeing things like Twister and Independence Day, but I was like, oh yeah, I'm 18. Let me go see Matilda with my friends. That just wasn't going to happen at the time. But now I'm at an age where I can appreciate the magical aspects and the wonderfulness of Matilda. So
yeah, I think I was just a touch too old for this one too. I don't really remember it coming out. And when I was looking at it, I was curious as to why. Well, maybe why didn't it connect with audiences was a question. And I think the nearest I could figure was it did open against Independence Day, which was like that summer's movie. Like, and I think even family audiences that sort of ate up all those box office dollars because families went to go see Independence Day and maybe they missed Matilda.
Yeah, I remember the trailer having it. It was because there's scenes where she's like moving stuff around, and I think they played a Harry Belafonte song in the movie trailer, which was reminiscent of Beetlejuice. Which there's certainly some Tim Burton vibes in this film, But yeah, I'm kind of it's one of those things that's like befuddling that this film didn't make more money, and particularly in its post theatrical run, how like beloved it's become.
Yeah, I went. You know how Carrie Elwes does the like tour where he does the showings and
Yeah.
he has a talk with you afterwards. I went to one of those in Columbus, and there was a long discussion he had about how thankful he was for home video. That he really thought The Princess Bride was a flop until he suddenly had fans, had a cult following, and it was because people bought it for their kids and they started watching it at home with family. And I was thinking about Matilda during that event. I was like, Matilda's kind of a similar situation, where I think, again, a lot of people my age that I've asked really just didn't even know that it had a theatrical release. I was a little bit young I was going to the theater at that age, but my family was not in the theater a lot in the 90s because we had VHS and it was more affordable to go to like Blockbuster. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I worked at a video store in the '90s. Not a Blockbuster, but children's movies and were like 50 cents or $1. So that it's hard to pass up that deal if you've got kids that want to watch a Disney movie or something.
Yeah, and it makes sense that the appeal of Independence Day would be for the whole family versus like going to Matilda is really just for the kids, probably more.
It makes me think about how we don't really have a lot of quote unquote family films anymore, and it was the kind of things that ended up going straight to video or on television now or streaming. That those things got funneled into more what was much more lucrative in like sales and rentals and things like that. That it was kind of not necessarily out of step, but it was a form that had been very lively in the 80s and into the 90s, and it's just kind of it's not the kind of film. We don't see these kind of kid family films out giving big theatrical releases anymore. So, what are your kind of something, had you seen this one before?
No, I maybe had believed I'd seen it, just but when I sat down to watch it, I was like, no, this is definitely the first time I've watched this movie. I think I was familiar with like the images of it. I think Trunchbull is like the image that really escapes this movie. So like when I see her, I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen that movie with the lady in the sweatshirt. But then when I was watching, I was like, no, I never saw this version of it. I came to Matilda maybe like a weird way. I don't think I read Roald Dahl stories growing up. I don't think I really encountered like sitting down and reading and paying attention to Roald Dahl until I was a public school teacher. I was a fan of teaching a few of his short stories, which are like great, very entertaining, interesting short stories, and also like some connected to whatever middle grade learning objectives I was interested in at the time,
Yeah.
and also were things I had copies of. So I think I taught his story The Landlady a lot in the middle grades, and his story Lamb to Slaughter, which is one I really like, and there's like a great Twilight Zone episode of that too. But I don't think I ever like sat down with Matilda until in 2013 I was in New York City with my girlfriend at the time, and we were just wandering around doing whatever. Like I don't think we had like a good plan, and we managed to get cheap tickets to the Broadway show Matilda when it was in preview week, which is like the week before it opens. So we went to go see the previews for Matilda, which I thought preview week was like, there's no discernible difference between seeing and seeing after it opens. It's like a extremely technical like delineation. It's just the show. So I watched that show. It like really blew me away. Like it has this great music in it. I thought the show was very entertaining. The character who played the dad, the father, like so there's like intermission, and when you come back from intermission, the father comes out like in character, but he just does like stand up in front of the curtain for like 5-10 minutes, and he's really just like working the crowd. I thought that was like fantastic way to like come back from intermission. It has this one great song in it. Like even if you're little, you can do a lot. You should little thing like little stop you. I loved that song. But the thing I always remember about watching the Matilda musical in preview week in 2013 was the little girl who played Matilda was so good. And it's like really, I think, a hard part. Like she's on stage in every scene she carries that show, and she's got to be like 6, 7, 8, 9, like this little girl on stage. And she was singing the big number in the first act. and she's like dancing around the set, and I remember she tripped and she fell down, and I just remember thinking, well, if that was me, even like now, like at my adult age, that's the end of my life and career. But she like didn't. It was as if it didn't even happen. Like she was just up and back in it, and didn't even. It's not that she didn't miss a beat; she didn't like miss a breath. And I was like, what an amazingly strong performer to watch this little child. So I always had this really that's when the story Matilda really endeared me. I remember walking around for some time saying that I had Matilda mania. That was my favorite thing to say at the time. I've got Matilda mania.
So I wanted to dig into the film here. And so what were, some of the things that you all noticed in your kind of, now I have to say something about this film. What are some of the things that stuck out to you in the film version or the film version? And I think the book and the movie are the movie is pretty faithful to the book. But there's some difference. There's some things added in the movie for sure.
I think one of the things Ian and I both mentioned was it feels worth talking about that the story has a kind of contempt for film and television. And from what I've heard, Roald Dahl did not like adaptations of his work and really hated Willy Wonka in particular. And so I do think it's interesting that DeVito kind of leaned into that instead of shying away from it, that it kind of is the thing that it's ridiculing. I don't know.
Yeah, I forgot when I was watching this. I was like, oh yeah, this story has an obscene contempt for television. And then I did think, is it funny to make a movie about a story that hates television?
It's good to be contemptuous of your audience that they're paying to watch this film. Yeah. I mean, I do think it is. I mean, I feel like the book and the movie, they're like this is a story for young girls who love reading and love school and love their teachers, and that's the happiest they may have ever been in their lives.
Our latchkey kids.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, it feels kind of very 80s because the novel came out in 1988, which is weird to me because it feels like one of these like timeless children's stories.
Oh yeah, I did not know this was a novel from 1988.
Not quite his last, but I think it was one of his near his last published novels.
You wouldn't, because the aesthetic of it is very like World War II England. It's the reform school, the Trunchbull British reform school vibes. All of that is very British and a little like Roald Dahl's work is kind of Dickensian. And so I know Ian had mentioned that like it's kind of weird that it's been Americanized, and a lot of his adaptations have been.
I wondered too, I when I was watching the movie, I wonder if this was a story mismatch, because this is like a quintessentially British story. I don't really know the history of what was going on in the British public schools in and around World War II, but I don't know a writer who presents it with any
warm
joy.
Feelings. Warm plots.
And the story is all just directly transposed to suburban California, and to me, like those images of like the like suburban Pasadena streets or wherever they filmed it, felt like such a mismatch for how the school appeared. Like it wasn't. It is not an American story, but it's happening to Americans with American background and American mise-en-scène, and to me, it felt like kind of like a mismatch. Like, is it wrong to transpose the story so directly, so like to stay so literal and true to what the story is, but like put it in this setting? Was it wrong?
Yeah, like he kind of just took two. He kept some things the same, but then tried to reimagine other things. But they're so relegated to the settings that it feels like you're almost watching two different films. So like you have the home is that like 80s bright aesthetic, and then you have the school being the more drab aesthetic, which is maybe an inversion of what I would expect. But I think it like, I assumed it was him trying to preserve some of that grittiness from the original, while maybe appealing more to a modern audience with the 80s latchkey kid kind of aesthetic that's going on there. But it does it makes it feel like, because there's a distinct part in the film, you have the first part of her life where she discovers that she loves reading. She hasn't quite discovered her like powers yet. And then you have Mr. Wormwood making this deal with Trunchbull that sends her to this school, and she kind of enters it like a secondary world because the aesthetic is so different. It feels almost like a secondary world. But I think where it's strange is that she's dealing with the same problems and the same kind of antagonists in both of those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not so sure why like her home in her neighborhood looks like that, but the school, looks like it does.
It's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, it's about a little over an hour and a half. It's a very concise movie. Everything, it moves very well, but it has this. It feels like by the time you get to the end of it and you're thinking about the first part, it's like, whoa, we've come a long way from this. The antagonists, the Wormwoods, they're super apathetic. They're vain. They're crook. They're crook. The father's a crook, and there's that kind of neglect as an antagonist. Where when you get to the British Reform School, which seems to have a smokestack from a Pink Floyd visual of something, and then you have a much more malignant antagonist that is actively like she cares too much about your need to be pushed down and suppressed, and she is an educator who would rather not have kids exist, which is why she should never have been in education to begin with. So
yeah, I kind of there's the adults in the film fall into kind of two categories for me, like cruelty versus ambivalence, and Trunchbull being kind of on the far end of cruelty. I think of Mr. Wormwood being more that direction, but there are also kind of some ambivalent moments with him. Like, for instance, when Matilda breaks the TV, she immediately says, "I didn't do it." And he says, like, "Of course you didn't do it, you little twit." Like, there are moments where he seems like humanized, and then they immediately kind of rip that away. But that's one of the reasons I really like Rhea Perlman's performance, because she really masters that like ambivalent delivery. So like Matilda comes home from school on the first day and she'll ask Matilda, "How was school?" But when Matilda tries to tell her, she's literally putting her fingers in her ears, putting a pillow over her ear. And same kind of thing with like the last line that she has is like, "Oh, you were the only daughter I ever had. And I never knew you. I never understood you, not one bit." And then who's got a pen, right? So there are moments where you're like, oh, I think she cares, and then she's just kind of ambivalent, which is almost like was like more unsettling to me as a kid than like the straight up cruelty that you might have seen from like Mr. Wormwood or Trunchbull. Like there was something about the instability or the insecurity of having like ambivalent adults in your life. And I know this is common with children's literature. Roald Dahl did it. Same kind of thing with like Series of Unfortunate Events. You're trying to talk to the adults, but they don't understand. They don't care. They don't believe you. They're not listening. But I think it falls into the category of like things that unsettled me when I was a kid. This film does, because of that like lack of stability. And I think the way that the adults were performing it was just really interesting.
Yeah, you put me in mind. It was I remember from some article about Dahl, and Dahl he basically thought it would have been a good idea if 1 week a year adults walked around on their knees to remind them of what it was like to be a child, and how terrifying adults are. And I was just like, really, I've always taken that to heart. But like in terms of the camera work and the framing, this film does an exceptional job of putting you at the level of the child. Mara will. It's really weird that you have a movie where Danny DeVito, who is, I looked online, he's listed as 5 foot. Rhea Perlman is also listed as 5 feet tall, but she's actually in the film she's shown as being several inches taller. But these are two well-known short, actors on the shorter side. And they just tower and dominate over Matilda. There's just how many high angle shots can we have of Matilda or little Matilda? There was the slightly younger version of Matilda that goes to the library, and she's so small in the frame. There's one shot I thought was really where she's trying to cross the street and she's very scared, and you see the back shot of people's rear ends, and it's just like, this is what a child would have to deal with at 5 or 6. Is look, I'm at the level of grown-ups' butts or whatever, and it's kind of silly and it's absurd, and it's just there's a kind of hint of like there's just an indignity to it that she has to endure these things. And I think the film shows her to be, just puts her at that disadvantage visually throughout. And people like Trunchbull just take up the screen and ham it up so wonderfully well in it.
I was thinking about like the direction of this film, because this film's not subtly directed, but I think it's very thoughtfully directed, where it's full of extremes in terms of like the way it's shot and edited, but I think everything has a point or a purpose. So there's nothing in it that's like showing off or like revving its engine or doing a wheelie, but like every like shot that's super extreme is for connected to story, or every edit that's a little like experimental or like breaking the diegetics of the scene is doing it in service of story to like create a moment. And I think this film is very well put together from DeVito, and I do think a lot of it is thinking about, like you just said, like the
POV
the
shot
perspective of Matilda, and that you said that presentation of adults, and that the fear that comes from adults is, I think, maybe like the way you say an adult seems very scary to a kid, and it is because we are very ambivalent until the second we're mad, and like you can't perceive the adult mind when you're a kid, and you can't tell that maybe they aren't going to pick you up and hammer throw you one time for a slight that you can't even quite understand what you did wrong. I think that's all kind of in this film. And I do think it's a very thoughtfully directed film. I really I want to go back and look at Danny DeVito's feature film work, which I think I have not much studied. But I do remember like Death of Smoochie in 2002, which was his follow-up to this movie, and a very funny movie in 2002. For some reason, when I was a kid, I really liked the movie Throw Mama from a Train. It must have been on TV all the time, but I just thought it was so funny, and I used to watch it all the time. And I remember as a kid being like, I don't think I get everything in this movie, but I'm laughing. So I wanted to go back and take a look at them. I think to me, Danny DeVito might be overlooked as a director and filmmaker. When I looked through even like his directing career is filled with very interesting movies. He was directing movies from 1987. His last feature film came out in 2003. As a producer, though, like he has a very extensive list of work. Like as a producer and executive producer, has a really wide range and diverse list of films. He was an executive producer on Pulp Fiction. He was a producer on films like from Man on the Moon to Reno 911, the Miami movie. So really big and small productions, comedies and dramas, some very like weird films. There's no like clear thread of movies that he seems to be gravitated to produce, other than they are all very interesting and also I think a lot of times very risky films. Just in 1994, for example, he produced Reality Bites, a romantic comedy, which is very of that era. Pulp Fiction, one of the most interesting films of the 1990s, and then the rodeo drama 8 Seconds. So he's like, just in that year, he's producing these 3 very different movies for 3 very different audiences, and seems, I don't know, I think Danny DeVito has like a good mind for the film business, but also he like sees film in a different way. Like he understands performers and productions and has a very omnivorous like attitude about film.
Yeah, I remember I remember seeing War of the Roses with Danny DeVito, Kathleen Turner, and Michael Douglas, and it is a very bitter film to say the least. I watched that as an 89 or 9. Watched it on a double bill, saw The Little Mermaid, and saw The War of the Roses, which I like The War of the Roses better. But yeah, he seems to be someone who he's someone who he seems to be big into. He came out of television with Taxi. He seems to be someone who's big into collaboration. I mean, he's been he and Rhea Perlman had been married for a long time. They're still married, but they're separated. But that he kind of knows the acting, knows the business, and just likes to get involved. I mean, I think nowadays most people know him most as Frank Reynolds from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. But he's someone who's into collaborate. He doesn't necessarily. He's clearly got ideas. He's got thoughts. He's got a vision. But he's there to take everyone along with him. So probably he's a good guy to work with.
In 2016, he directed this film called Curmudgeons. It's a short film. It stars David Margulies and also his daughter Lucy DeVito. And it is one of my favorite movies. It is like such an interesting and like beautiful short film. It's adapted from a one-act play by the screenwriter Joshua Conkle. I think the way DeVito delivers that movie is very interesting. It was like a popular short film on the short film circuit in 2016. I think, but you can watch it on Vimeo. Like, I believe it was the premier Vimeo staff pick, which was their some ongoing program since 2016, where they choose a film festival film to highlight on Vimeo. And I always suspected that DeVito had a special affection for that short film because he was promoting it for a long time, like taking it to a lot of festivals and appearing at festivals in support of it. I think in part maybe because it was David Margulies' final performance. I think he died before the film was released. I cannot recommend that short film enough to any human being to watch. It's like a very cool movie. And I think here you see that director from 1996 and 2016 who has that same sort of like thoughtfulness in his presentation in film form. There aren't like the extremes of Matilda, but every decision in that movie is in service of story, and like someone who doesn't want to never like even as like showy as Matilda is, it never gets in the way of the story, which I like really appreciated about it.
So I was thinking about the performances maybe as you go. I mean, you've got these very, I would say, very different and contrasting styles of characters in this film. I think it has that kind of emotional roller coaster quality to it, and you have characters who are one extreme and the other. I don't know thoughts about any of these performances, which I think are quite wonderful and surprisingly blend together pretty well.
I think all the kids are fantastic. I don't think that's easy. There are several big child movie carrying child performances in this film, and I do not think that's an easy thing to produce and direct. I think the main character is fantastic. She has to put the weight of this film on her shoulders. She couldn't have been 8 years old when they made this movie, and she does so well. I was particularly fond of there is like in the opening of the movie there is a slightly younger Matilda who's more like 4, who I couldn't believe the performance of this 4 or 5 year old. And there are many unbelievable things. The brother in the movie is fantastic and delivers a great performance for what is a very static character, but like perfectly delivers in every scene. The supporting cast of students around her at school are all like really fantastic. I think that is just like a hard thing to pull off.
The girl who played Amanda Thripp, they put her on a rig and spun her around for that sequence. And I think from what I've heard, I think Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman worked together really hard to make it like a safe and good place for the child actors to thrive, from what Mara Wilson has said. And so I think that security kind of, it's interesting and ironic that security kind of comes through on the screen, even though the whole thing is about kids not feeling security. But yeah, all of the kids are really good.
I feel like it's particularly Mara Wilson, who is someone who often is a child actor that turned out well, you know. And I think she wrote a cracked article. It's like suddenly she pops up and this is the thing with child actors and what they have to deal with. And it was like, my thought was, this is really informative, and Mara Wilson is a really good writer. And one of the things I was very interested in is that her performance, for lack of a better word, I found her performance naturalistic. It didn't feel child actory in a way. There was a certain maturity. There's not. She delivers. I mean, this is not a criticism. There's a kind of flat delivery to a lot of it, which is not like I'm a child actor, ha ha ha, kind of voice. It is this very kind of, this is how a child would talk. A bright, intelligent child would talk in that, and her kind of, she doesn't overdo things too much. So I think because a lot of the film is everybody's going over the top, that you need that she's oddly the grounding influence in the film, even though she has telekinetic powers and she's reading well above her grade level and things like that. She feels like the most grounded character in the film.
Which is supported by the visuals, because I think the difference between the rest of the Wormwood house and like Matilda's room and the rest of the Wormwood like aesthetic, wardrobes, all of the flashiness and the gaudiness, and then you have Matilda with a very kind of utilitarian wardrobe and room, and the focus is on the books and going to school and all of that. I think is an interesting kind of visual representation of her being the grounded one, or the one who has logic or sense.
There's the scene in the middle of the movie where Matilda like comes home and she has to make herself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but she has to make it you know those jars where it's like peanut butter and jelly striped together, which I think is kind of like a dumb product, but like she has to, I've never had it, so maybe it's great, but she has to like make it out of that. But while she's making herself a peanut butter and jelly, which is like minimum sensible food, all she has access to is like the dumb overproduced mixed jelly peanut butter. So she's got to make do with what she's got. She's just trying to make herself really basic food. Her mother and father are eating like, it's like skewers with marshmallows and jelly beans.
Yep.
It's so weird.
Yep. Talking about the speedboat salesman outside.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that was like the production design of the, this was maybe like a kid thing, like a parent's master bedroom in this odd date, like usually there's other families' parents' master bedrooms. These kind of like the audacious, like intersanctum of the parents and how all their stuff is there, and it just looks like it's like she's going into the lion's den when she's trying to prank her dad at that point. I think there's something like a lot of this is a film that has a lot of those primal kid urges and curiosities in it, like, yeah, well, let's go rescue the doll, or let's play a trick on the evil principal and things like that. So it is this kind of and I think has to do much with the book, is that you want the child to be like ethical and more or less well behaved, but you glee at the tricks and the pranks and the misbehavior, the kind of misadventures that she goes through, even though she's like a good, decent, ethical child.
Yeah, I really like the narration in particular where DeVito says that was the first time that she realized that adults could be punished too, because he says when a person is bad, they have to be punished. And so that kind of idea that like feels a little bit provocative for 90s parents to have had their kids like watching or reading this idea that you can like punish your parents. At least in my household, it would have been. But I loved that. That felt like such a cool thing for me to be able to see, like this idea that she's clearly so much smarter than her parents, and she is able to kind of dole out justice to them.
I think that's one of the things that makes Dahl and a lot this like this is controversial. It's teaching kids to be, disrespectful and delinquents or things like that. And it's just like it fundamentally misunderstands like that there's a delight in the storytelling, and that, kids are people too. That even if they don't have the intellectual capacity at that point yet, they are still complex emotional creatures, beings. Matilda's basically super powered by anger and extensive book reading. So this is where her powers come from. So
I thought that like this version of the story compared to other versions of the story made it much more clear that her powers are connected to how mad she is at her dad.
Yeah.
I don't remember that point being as foregrounded in other versions of the story I've seen, but when she really gains control of her power, she's like having her dad yell at her, and she's like focused on her father, and that is what sort of like charges her telekinesis up. And I don't know, I wanted to go back and check, like, but I don't think that's how that essentially works in other versions of the story. So that was an interesting choice to be like, to connect to. Why is she telekinetic? She's so mad at her awful dad.
Yeah, and I think there are ways that the Trunchbull's dialogue is really reminiscent of Mr. Wormwood's dialogue in ways that make it more clear that even when she's using those abilities on Trunchbull, it's because she is recognizing this archetype of bully that she's been dealing with her entire life as her father. And I think also the sequences where we see Trunchbull and Mr. Wormwood talking to each other or trying to bully each other also really accentuate that they're similar, and that all comes from a really raw place for Matilda that starts with Mr. Wormwood. which then makes it really interesting that he's the narrator, which we haven't really talked about yet.
I kind of like struggled with that idea because I was like, is this a mistake? Because I think the reason he's the narrator is because it's Danny DeVito, the famous actor with a famous voice, narrating and explaining the movie. I don't think the narrator is supposed to at all be
Mr.
Wormwood, because I don't think he's ever in character to that degree.
Mm-mm.
And also the character does not have access to the amount of reflection that he has. Like the character exits the story without being like, oh, and this story changed me so I can see my daughter differently. This is a different performer telling you what Matilda thinks and feels and how she relates to these people around her. And I was just like, when I was watching the movie, I was like, is this too confusing to have the same voice in this movie twice with different purposes?
From a childhood perspective, I read it as Mr. Wormwood. And so now I'm like, that's just Danny DeVito. And I think part of it is him just kind of taking ownership of what was a passion project for his daughter and kind of reading her the story. But so I'm like, I see that distinction now, but definitely as a child, I was like, why is Mr. Wormwood narrating and why is he so nice and sympathetic? And it further kind of confused like whether it added maybe a little bit of complexity to the parent relationship, but also like drove me in like a weird direction with the character a little bit.
Yeah, there's no. It seems like it could work if there was some amount in the narration of, and now I realize.
Yeah.
But there's none of that, and there's no interplay with how complicated that is. Where it's like the narrator is the father, and the father's the narrator, but they're distinct and different. I just think it would have been more legible if it was just a different performer.
Look at Julie Andrews had voiced the narrator.
Too British. It would need to be American.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything like, well, DeVito has a distinctive voice. I never really noticed it's the Danny DeVito voice, right? It's not Danny DeVito. There's no like sweetheart Danny DeVito voice. Even if he is saying sweetheart kind things, it sounds like Danny DeVito. So it is a bit of a incongruity with it. So
it does make the father figure relationship in the movie more complicated, which is something that this movie is interested in doing, is making like the position of the father a little bit more complicated than it is in other versions of the story. So maybe it works on that level where it's just like, well, who is this guy?
Yeah. I specifically with DeVito's more like the performance too, but the writing of Mr. Wormwood was, I felt like it was a really authentic depiction of a really blustery, ill-tempered father who like is reactive and then says things that they have no idea what they're talking about or don't make any sense. The main dialogue pieces, one of my favorite quotes was Moby What? I'm reading Moby Dick by Herman Melville. It's lovely. And he's Moby What? And then when he gets his hat glued on and he just keeps saying fibers are fused to the head, fibers are fused to the head. And Mrs. Wormwood's, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? That felt like just a really authentic version of that kind of dad that made him like scary, but also human. Like you can see in the moments where he's getting angry, where like his intellect is not, I mean, we already know his intellect is not on par with Matilda's, but also kind of seeing him as a human makes him a little bit more complex. I don't know. I'm trying to think through what I thought of him as a kid. And I don't think I thought he was fully a villain because of probably the performances, same with Rhea Perlman, but then the ending, they gave her up so easily that it was like, well, that's okay. I guess I should have expected that.
The brother's like, I'll be an only child again.
Yeah. The thing with the brother drives me crazy because there's no, like we get dialogue from Mrs. Wormwood and Mr. Wormwood that are sort of, okay, here's how we're making this decision. But like, she doesn't even like really say goodbye to her brother. And there's no conversation at all. He might wave at her through the back window. I can't remember. But I was like, how does he feel about this? Do they have literally no relationship?
I mean, go ahead.
I struggle with the ending of the story every time because it's just something I feel. Whenever I encounter any version of the story, the decision that Miss Honey makes to adopt Matilda arises as if from nowhere all of a sudden. and then it's always in one scene in which it completely resolves. Is I could adopt you. That sounds good. Here are my parents. They say yes. And that's such an emotionally complicated idea. And I get that her parents don't care about her, but but even for her, like the idea that she's leaving her family, I get that that's her desire is to leave her family, but it just all happens so quickly, so smoothly as a solution to the entire story, and I always disconnect from it. It doesn't feel earned to me ever, and it's just a thing that's baked into the story. Like that is the big third act. All of a sudden, let's solve all the problems with this one idea, and I've never seen a version of the story that really. I mean, it'd be inappropriate to delve into how complicated that would be logistically and emotionally.
It doesn't bother me so much in the book, and I think it's because the emotional complexity isn't as drawn out in the book. And
It's like the last 5 pages or something like that.
yeah,
If that.
yeah. But in the film, it's like I think we're developing maybe more attachments to more characters and figuring out emotional complexities a little bit more, and so it just feels wrapped up too quickly. Whereas in the book, it's kind of like, okay, well, it's a children's book, and of course it could be that easy because why not? But then, yeah, in the film, it feels really rushed, especially because it's like we're leaving for Guam and you can hear the sirens. Like it's way too pressurized.
But I did like that the movie Matilda was like, went to the library, learned how to file adoption. Once I'd learned to Xerox some adoption papers here, sign here, and we're good. Yeah, if only things. I think it does play into that kind of. It's the schoolgirl who loves her teacher and loves books and loves school. This would be the perfect. I get to live with my teacher, who I think is awesome and is nurturing and caring, and they seem to appreciate me, and we just live together forever, having tea and having a good time and learning. So, and reading books together and things like that. So, it does have that kind of fairy tale happily ever after kind of vibe to it. But yeah, I mean, I think narratively it does seem a little wrapped up, but I'm not gonna like begrudge it. It doesn't bother me as much. So, so I was kind of interested in kind of the depiction of the school, the depiction of Trunchbull, or in the book it's the Trunchbull, and actress Pam Ferris. You'd noted that she'd been on Call the Midwife and had done a lot of theater work.
Oh yeah, I was curious about her just as an actor because I didn't like recognize her outside of this role, and I was just like, what else has the lady been up to? And it turns out she has a very long career in film and television.
She was in I think the second Harry Potter film, just in like the first, like
The third one, I think.
20 minutes. Is it the third one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Where she plays an similar character, an aunt who's a jerk.
Yeah.
I remember her. Well, she played Miriam in Children of Men, and she was the woman who was the midwife, and she was one of the last she helped birth the last babies in Children of Men. The world stops having babies, and then people get really depressed because it's been like 18 years, and so she's someone who was there when it all kind of ended, and she's trying to help this one woman who happens to be pregnant, helping her. So it's interesting. I don't think they like Alfonso Cuarón or the people who made Children of Men. Like that woman hated kids, and now we have someone who's a very nurturing. We'll have her play somebody who's very nurturing and protective of mothers and children. But I think it is interesting to see how physically. I mean, she's quite a stout, kind of imposing figure, but just completely different attitude, outlook, and tone that she brings. This menacing character, this much more nurturing kind of character, which is a testament to her range as a performer.
I thought her performance in the movie was very interesting, but also I thought very brave and selfless. Like she allows herself to be vile. Like the character is very vile, but also she allows herself to be ugly and disgusting. And what I could think as I was watching this, just like I'd imagine putting the makeup on her skin to make it look all red and blotchy and ruin her teeth, and then shoot her in these extreme close-ups. As all I could think was like, oh, she must have really trusted Danny DeVito, or they must have had a really clear collaboration on this is how this should look and this is how it should feel. And she just seemed to enter it like, no, just do everything. I thought it was really brave. I thought it really paid off. And I was thinking also, I have no direct evidence, but DeVito must have appreciated he put her in his next movie. Like, they must have had a close collaboration on what this character should be. Like, there's a real vision for it and just a fearlessness in how it's approached.
Especially because it is the kind of character that turns into like a lasting image.
Yeah.
You had said, asked if we thought the enduring image of the film was Trunchbull in the gray sweatshirt. And that was my Halloween costume in 2017, so I'm going to say yes. But to not only play a role like that, but to play a role like that and really lean into it so much that like you're okay with a generation of children being like, you're the Trunchbull,
Yeah.
is really cool.
She didn't really like try to protect herself at all in this role, which I think was hard, like a hard decision to make, to be just like, I'm all in on this vileness.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of thing where, and it's, to me at least, it's a performance that doesn't fall into cliche. It is so particular to this character. I felt like it was obviously, like, I think, you see the Wormwoods, they're actually very childish, and Trunchbull is very childish. Like, she's obsessed with sweets. She doesn't keep her house clean. She's enormous. Like, this is what happens when a child is never told no and doesn't learn anything about, I don't know, ethics, or how to treat people. That you get somebody like Trunchbull.
But she never was a kid.
Yeah, she never was a kid, but yet she's just a big, enormous, violent kid who loves to there's a kid here. I'm going to commit random violence on them because I'm feeling a little frustrated and embarrassed. And it's something that it feels like it should be a cliched performance, but it is not a cliched performance, given that it kind of just is something so specific to that character. It seems very distinctive to other menacing kind of, women villain characters. So, and yeah, it's really great, and I'm happy. I do think that the levels of humiliation they give her is largely justified. I mean, she, they're like they're throwing all her food. They're shaming her and they're throwing food at her at the end. I'm kind of like, I'm okay. This is probably mean and cruel on the part of the children in the film, but I'm okay with this. Kind of feeling good. And it's not nearly as mean in the book. There's just kind of the chalk scene happens and she gets scared and runs away. But yeah, I mean, Trunchbull's a terrible, terrible person, and she got exactly what she deserved. So.
Yeah, it is nice that they let all the kids in the school in on her humiliation, because it's not just Matilda she's been terrorizing. So it is nice that they all get their comeuppance in the end. She gets chased through the whole school with.
Poor Amanda Thripp was victimized so many times.
Yeah.
I like in that scene where she's being kind of pushed out of the school that like you can see students come to the hallway, see what's going on, retreat to get their own lunches, and then come back. Like there was time and they were like, we're taking this opportunity.
We'll go hungry today. It's fine with us. Yeah. And yeah, it's just the school reflects her outlook, the house that was very nice. I think you'd mentioned this, the stairwell with, I mean, it's just like, what are you doing? It's like it's such a hazard, and all like the basement is nightmare fuel, and the stairs, it's so clunky and cluttered and a hoarder situation. It is just, it's a wonderful production design. I will say that.
Yeah, the attention to detail in the set design and in the costuming is amazing. The back stairwell in the kitchen with all the pots and the pans, just it feels just like such an organic, like, yes, this is what happens when someone runs out of storage and they just build up the kitchen stairs or whatever, but also served such a good function in the trying to get out scene, because you're trying to get down the stairs and everything is clinking, and then the back door is nailed shut. So you can't get out the back door. I also love just the continual callback to her Olympics events as just like being her entire identity, that she is always trying to, even the kids saying she's always doing shot put or hammer throw. And those are kind of the ways that she abuses. Yeah, or javelin. That's the way that she abuses you.
All the exercises and shaping of her body to throw heavy objects is also used in doing that to the. She has made her body to hurt to hurt and torture kids, and the chokey it feels so homemade. It's got these nails sticking out, and you mentioned like kind of the steam coming up. It looks like this wonderful improvised torture device. So yeah, and I and I think one thing I think is that you have rather like the scene where Matilda and Miss Honey are trying to steal Lizzie doll back. That's it seems more like an action film at that point, and it goes back to like Home Alone. In Home Alone, there's a lot of violence, which kids love, but Hollywood had studied and figured out that little kids were watching things like Die Hard, and they really like things like Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, and so they started putting those kind of more action violence in kids' films. And I think that's also a little bit of that. I think a little more not like gleeful. Let's torture these two guys who are going to kind of rob my house. That's very primal, but there's like it's a stealth mission. It's a stealth mission like in a video game that Miss Honey and Matilda go on to try to retrieve something and successfully escape. So
I'm curious about people's thoughts on Miss Honey and Embeth Davidtz.
Yeah,
performance, which she was in Bridget Jones's Diary. She played like the Caroline Bingley of that retelling. So like not a nice character, and is just so insanely sweet as Miss Honey.
I think Miss Honey is an interesting character. Is that she is in such like direct opposition to all the other adults in the film. She's the one who listens to kids, and she has a secret plan to educate the children and care for them. And she's like literally hiding how kind and nice she is for the entire movie. I often think when I watch this story is like she's like too good, where I'm like, wouldn't she also like belong to that adult world just a little bit? But I do think that I did when I was watching this, I thought that Embeth Davidtz, who was not a performer, like I could call to mind immediately, I thought she was doing a really good job of being that like very nurturing like teacher figure, like, and maybe I always like Miss Honey a little bit because she is a teacher and I'm a teacher. And I'm like, yeah, you can be a teacher and like want the best for your kids. It's not a thing where you just lord your authority over young people.
Yeah. And I think I would expect with a story like this, I would expect to come back as an adult and just be like laying into the adult characters, like, oh, you could have done more about this or whatever. And I don't have that experience with Miss Honey. I do have like some qualms about moments where I'm like, okay, you're the adult in the room, not Matilda. And I know that her backstory with Trunchbull complicates that. And she does some very brave things, like going and taking her out of the chokey while Trunchbull's teaching her class. Although I'm like, did she do that for other students? Did she just do that for Matilda, who's really smart? Because she does seem really into Matilda's intellect and this idea of kind of helping mold her at the beginning. But I do think there are a few moments like the promise you won't come back to the house and Matilda's like, yeah, I won't. That I'm like, come on, you know she's going to do something. There are a couple, and in the end with the adoption where it's like, oh, okay, but she didn't think of it sooner, didn't have any discussions with anyone at any point, where I'm like, Matilda's so much the adult that then I think by the end of the film, it starts to make Miss Honey look a little impotent as an adult. I don't know. just my thought.
I mean, I do think there is the emotional journey of Miss Honey in the film, and it was really nice acting from Embeth Davidtz when she goes to talk to the Wormwoods, and just the way. And again, I think it's a nice contrast. Like Danny DeVito's very like powerful, memorable voice, and she's just. Can just tell that she's trying to be firm and louder, but she just can't do it. And she's clearly like, I think there's this kind of slowly building her confidence up that happens. Maybe it's one of the more subtle things in the movie. But I also think it's just emotionally, I would say that she never got a childhood where the parents were there because they died when they were young, or were likely one of them likely being murdered in some fashion. and she gets to have that with Matilda at the end. And I would say I was a little bit of an Embeth Davidtz fan around 92 or
Yeah.
93 because I remember seeing her. She's an Army of Darkness. She's the Bruce Campbell's love interest who turns into a Deadite. And I was like, wow. And then I knew at that point that she was also going to be in Schindler's List as Helen Hirsch. She was basically the kind of maid to Ralph Fiennes' monstrous character. So she's really got a knack for being in movies where there are monstrous characters in them. But I was like, yeah, that's just wild thing. You're going to be in a Sam Raimi film, and then you're going to be in Steven Spielberg's more or less non-Steven Spielberg film, and then you're going to have crazy Danny DeVito that you're going to make a film with. And she was also in a film. One of my favorite films is one called Junebug. It was Amy Adams kind of first came on the scene. She plays an art dealer who goes to North Carolina to try to sign this outsider artist, and she's married this guy that's from North Carolina, and just meeting that family for the first time. When I saw that film, I was like, this is like the one film I felt got the South right. I was like, wow, this is like where I grew up. It feels like where I grew up. And
Say the title again. I'm sorry.
Huh?
What was the title of that one?
Junebug.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a 2005 film. It's got the Bonnie Prince Billy guy, the guy who plays Will Oldham's in it in a small part. Anyway, it's wonderful, and she's kind of the outsider in the story and things like that. So that's a real kind of indie film worth checking out. And she was on Mad Men, and yeah, I didn't know that she directed the film that you had mentioned. I didn't know she transitioned into directing, but she's had an interesting career.
Oh yeah, that's what I thought was interesting about her career. Was she directed her first film in 2024? So I thought it was interesting that she's transitioned into directing now. And she was another performer like Pam Ferris, who I was like, I don't really know this performer. And then when I look, I was like, oh, they've just had a very long, interesting career.
Yeah. So, yeah, it makes, and there's this clear kind of mirror image contrast between Miss Honey and Miss Trunchbull. And yeah, one of the things, yeah, the whole like hiding the nice classroom from Miss Trunchbull is so, it just was like, this is what you do when you have abusive people around you. You change everything to placate them. And just how, not only what a bully Trunchbull is, but what an abusive person. And to see how Miss Honey's character gets reduced so much because of that abuse and just having to get by. I kind of feel that on a certain level. I think particularly more with kind of the way we look at like people dealing with other toxic people and abusive people. It feels like it was maybe a little, it still seems very relevant looking at the film now with that particular dynamic.
I think the film really leans into it because it's one of the only films I remember, which I had a very sheltered childhood. So this isn't saying much, but it's one of the only like family or children's films I remember watching where there was discussion of suicide. And it ended up he was murdered, but there was discussion of it. And then like some just really dark moments of like, when Trunchbull finally says, I broke your arm once, I can do it again to her, where like you can sense the implication, but then it really does also just outright say things that I wasn't used to hearing or seeing in children's media that I think kind of lended it that interesting edge. And I know that I'd read in an interview back from 1996 when it was coming out, where DeVito had said that he had to shop it around with different studios because it was considered too dark by a lot of studios. And he mentioned, I don't remember which studio it was, but he was like, I shouldn't have been surprised because it's the same studio that turned down Pulp Fiction. Yeah. He definitely, like, there's a lot of like dark, unsettling implication, but there are also moments where they like look the darkness in the eye and it's like, no, I broke your arm or your father didn't kill himself, that I think are really interesting or were formative for me as a kid.
There's a moment in this film like that I knew was in the movie. Like if you asked me what are some things you know about Miss Trunchbull, I'd be like, well, she picks up that one girl by the pigtails and throws her. But when that moment is presented, it plays with like, will she clear the fence is like the big question. And the way that DeVito directs it with her headed towards is it called wrought iron, where it's like a pokey
Yeah.
fence. Oh, it was so scary to me. And it was like really looking at that violence. Like it was a vicious, like what was happening to her was cartoonish, but also like by pointing her at the fence directly, like she could be impaled, and the edit made it appear as if she was going to be impaled, but missed it by centimeters. It was, yeah, you're right about like it doesn't shy away from the viciousness or the violence in the story.
And that sequence, like the Bruce Bogtrotter one and the writing on the chalkboard one, they take that abuse and they kind of like stretch it into a sequence that turns it into a triumph. Like even though she didn't really win anything from that, like she was thrown over the fence, whatever, that you get like the introduction of the music, and then you have the kids kind of cheering for her to like have a win by missing the fence, and then you have her collecting the flowers as she goes through the field. Same kind of thing where like he built in room for it to like build up to a win or a triumph, even though the children weren't always winning in that situation.
I mean, it is like it's basically this. Seems like basically the whole school is against her, against Trunchbull, and it's just like at some point the exhaust valve's going to pop off, and and we get that, and she leaves, and that's great.
Cookie seems to be cool with her, the one who made the cake.
Yeah.
Now, but at the end, isn't there a shot of Cookie like
does
cheering
she?
and throwing cake too?
Yeah,
That's
that
what I
sounds
thought. I saw that and I remember thinking they should be chasing Cookie out too.
Yeah.
She's her little minion and she deserves her comeuppance.
She was snitching on, but she seemed to make a very chocolatey cake. So a little, I don't know, we'll keep you, like we'll keep. People like treats. We'll keep you around.
That scene was, that cake used to gross me out. I don't know. It was too moist. I don't know if a chocolate cake can be too moist, but it was a lot. But a really cool editing. I know you had mentioned in that scene the editing, and particularly those like floating head moments where they're in the audience and it fades to black and they're just kind of wondering if he'll make it. That makes it clear that time is stretching out far past when they're supposed to go home from school. And then the sound cutting out when she pulls the tray down on his head and it smashes.
The thing I admired about that sequence is the way that it built and built and built and gave the kids a real victory, like everyone on their feet cheering, and then let that linger long enough to let it be a true like crescendo of joy, and then have Trunchbull just crash that thing on his head and snatch it away, like to reinforce her authority, which is I thought was like for the middle of the movie exactly what you want. The idea that they can't escape. No, they can't. She's too powerful. I thought that was just like a perfect way to tell that story, and that sequence I thought played out so wonderfully and was like a real set piece for the movie. It's gross, it's weird, it's well constructed. And it has a lot of like interesting editing, but all in service of just creating that moment where he's on the stage, he ate the whole cake, and everyone's on their feet, and then she takes it from him, like vicious, vile, bully stuff.
He gets that whatever that 9th or 10th win that he gets, and he's like licking the thing, and it's just like, yeah, you did it, buddy, and there's so much just to smack it down. It just really sends the like. Nope.
I love these. It's hard to remember a specific cake. It's just like, just deny it, buddy. Yeah. The punishments there are a few different punishments, and then I really like the classroom visit, just all of the classroom visit scenes from Trunchbull that really show how nervous Miss Honey is to have her around, and some of the workarounds that she's having to do. But then, like the way Pam Ferris kind of like circulates through the room, like looking for a reason to punish people. One of my other favorite parts is when they spell difficulty, the Mrs. D, Mrs. I, and she slaps the writing crop on the desk. Just, why are all these women married? That are just like, that kind of reminds me of the DeVito moments where he just gets really upset and he says something. They're like, what are you talking about? But also maybe she has a point. I don't know.
Yeah. So, and I think we're about close to wrapping up here. Any other last thoughts or last reflections on this film?
Oh, I just want to mention that like Paul Rubens and Tracy Walter play the FBI agents in the movie. I think that they are barely in the movie, but just seeing their faces together, I got so excited because they're so I love Paul Rubens obviously, and like Tracy Walter I did recognize. I was, oh, that guy's in a lot of movies and he's very funny, and they don't ever do anything or even have like a significant scene, but I decided that like that was evidence of DeVito's direction, where he's like, I know that these FBI agents are underwritten, but it's an important part of the movie, so I need to cast it like dynamically, so like you're interested and you're engaged. Like, that's two very funny guys, so even though it's just you're seeing their faces a lot, they're always very funny and very silly, and when they have their moment it works. And I just thought that was like using casting very interestingly. I'll cast the most exciting comic actors you could imagine. They'll show up in the movie like they're going to be a big deal, and then no one will ever notice that it's nothing. It doesn't matter. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
They were high with a motorboat or
Speedboat salesman.
Speedboat salesman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when they would look through the camera and they're like watching him, one of my favorite shots is when they're surveilling and he walks out with a box full of car parts that are wrapped exactly like the shape of the car parts.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, and Zinnia Wormwood has them over and is just basically like giving, like they're both asking. They're like criminals who are asking to be caught. They would. It seems like they would prefer to be caught because they're so overt about how obvious they are. Yeah, but thoughts, final thoughts, reflections.
It's a great movie.
Yeah, I'd say so.
It's a great movie and a
It's
great
good.
version of the story.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's some aesthetic qualities that are feel a little mix and match, but in general it has like an energy and an intentionality to it that I think is what made it a cult classic for 90s kids.
I came to admire Danny DeVito as a director so much in 2016 when I watched that movie Curmudgeons, which is one that's really stuck with me for a long time. And then going back to this one, I was like, oh yeah, that's that same thoughtfulness, but in a very different film. And I think walking into this movie, I was like, I got to watch the rest of Danny DeVito's movies more carefully. Like, I think those are worth investigation. I'm going back for Throw Mama from the Train next. That's where I'm headed.
I remember it was Ebert and Roper said that Death to Smoochie was the worst. Was the number one for their worst film of the year, but they did say only geniuses could make a film this bad. So it was like I know it had Ed Norton, Robin Williams. I know you all are great, but you've made a bad film, which I think that's one that's kind of taken on a cult aspect to it as well. But.
Yeah. I think it's like whatever. I want to look at it again. I haven't looked at it since 2002.
I've never seen that one. I should probably watch that at some point.
I remember it being funny. I don't know.
I guess my is that there's just something delightful about children's stories what's so fun about children's stories that embrace just good, decent thought or something like that. And I think Dahl was very much a lot of his books like to punish the bad people and reward the good people, and that is a world we'd like to live in, I suppose. But that willing to go those dark routes, and I think it's something that certainly kids can take, and I wish adults could take that kids could take, kind of thing. Because, it's memorable. It sticks out to you. It's fun. The things you're disgusted by, you're disgusted by. The things you're thrilled by, you're thrilled by. And I really just like the thought of like a teacher and a young girl getting to live forever, hanging out and doing fun stuff. So, yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us for this episode of Giant Bombs. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you.